welcome. Chairman Frank and I will continue to debate the effectiveness of the GSE legislation that he brought to the Congress. Facts are today we have essentially 80% government control of Fannie and Freddie. Their conforming loan limits have increased, increasing their exposure. Their market share has increased precipitously. Taxpayers between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve now have roughly $1 trillion exposure out of a potential of $2 trillion. Does the administration plan to offer GSE reform legislation before year's end?
No.
Thank you. If not, when?
But I am looking forward to that discussion with you, because you're absolutely right that the system we have in place we cannot live with going forward, and that's why we've committed.
Is there a timetable for the administration to propose GSE reform legislation?
What we have said is that we believe early in the year we're going to outline at least our initial ideas on options for having to do that. So we need to begin that process soon. Okay. I agree with you, and I look forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I understand, I believe the administration is endorsing the chairman's bill that we are discussing today. Did I understand that from your testimony?
We work very closely with the chairman of the bill, and as I said, we think it meets the critical test of a strong package of reform.
Initially, under this bill, then, taxpayers would shoulder the initial burden of too big to fail. Then I believe that we hope that the institution may be resuscitated. They may be able to pay. Eventually, if that doesn't happen, competitors may end up having to foot the bill. This is not your understanding?
Resuscitated is the wrong word, exactly the wrong word. As I said in my statement, and the chairman said this too, you don't want the government in that context to act with the objective of saving the institution to allowing it to live for another day. That would be a mistake. What you want to do is to make sure they live with the consequences of their failure, and they can be unwound and sold and disassembled.
Well, I heard the chairman use the phrase death panels again in his opening statement, but as I've been able to read the 253-page bill, I do not believe that that type of resolution is required. It certainly is permitted. I did not see where it was required. Perhaps I've missed that in the bill.
Well, that is
the ultimate goal.
That's our objective, and I think it's a very important objective.
I agree. Let me ask you this question, Mr. Secretary. In thinking through this idea that firms that are in the marketplace will be able to either repay back money or their competitors will, do you believe, what portion of the $128 billion that AIG has received do you believe ultimately they will be able to pay back?
You know, we're in the process now, required by law, to provide a comprehensive valuation of the range of actions the government was forced to take in this crisis, both my predecessor and me, and we're going to be putting out that report in mid-December.
Do you have a range now of what you expect the taxpayer to return?
I can't give you a range now, but we'll give it to you soon.
Okay. How about with respect to General Motors and the roughly $63 billion?
In the same case.
Same category?
So we're going to provide a set of independent assessments of what the range of potential losses and gains are across those programs.
Mr. Secretary, we've had this discussion before about what was written into the ESA statute. The bottom line is that GM and Chrysler de facto have been considered financial institutions under the TARP statute, have received extensive government funding. We're designated essentially systemic firms. To many of us, that suggests that ultimately the number of perhaps Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies that ultimately could receive government bailout assistance is not unfortunately a limited universe. And when I think about this regime where one's competitors pay to essentially clean up your mess, if Walmart were to become insolvent, how smart or how fair is it to impose that cost upon Target and Costco?
Right now, Congressman, who bears the costs when firms screw up? What happens now is that companies, families, businesses, taxpayers, community banks bear that cost. We're proposing to change that for the simple reason it's not fair. And what is fair, we believe, is that in the end, because banks are special and risky, if they manage themselves to the point where they're imperiling the system, then if the government is supposed to loss...
Should Ford bear the cost of compensating the taxpayer for what happened to GM and Chrysler?
Look, I think you're making a good point, but but you have to look at the alternatives. The alternatives to what we're proposing, which is based on the existing framework for banks and thrifts. We're under the existing framework for banks and thrifts, under the laws of the land established by Congress. What happens is, if the government has to act to close an institution and it's exposed to any loss, it imposes a fee on banks. It's very simple, it's compelling, and it's better than the alternatives.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Alabama has a brief request.
Thank you. Unanimous consent request. I'd like to submit for the record a series of questions to Secretary Geithner on various aspects of this